I'm Jeff O'Keefe, the Executive Director of Zen Peacemakers, and I'm just going to open and welcome you and thank you for coming. And I'm going to pass this over here in just a minute. But every year around this date, for the last uh, 5 years, Bernie passed six years ago today, and we've tried to do something in memorial to remember Bernie and to come together as a community. We did it in two parts this year. A couple weeks ago, week ago, 2 weeks ago, I can't remember. 1 week ago, thanks, Ken. Ken's younger than I am, so his memory works better. We had Alyssa and Mark Glassman and Brenda Beck as our guests, and it was delightful to hear them talk about growing up at Zen Center Los Angeles and what that was like. So we had a very, very nice session. And now we're kind of going to the other end of the chronological spectrum, I guess you might say, with folks that are more contemporary with Bernie and have knew him back then and since up until 6 years ago, and perhaps beyond, who knows. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. I'm going to thank my friend Roshi Kinby-Allen for doing legwork to bring this together and reminding us each year to get the planning going on this event. So Ken, thank you so much, and I'll mute myself and I'll step back into the shadows and I'll let you take over.
Thank you. The briefest introduction that about a year ago, a group of Bernie's successors who were over 80 years old, we call ourselves the Elders, began to get together. One of the things that we've been offering is a Meet the Elders session on the first Monday of the month, sponsored by the Zen Peacemakers. And this just turns out to be the first Monday of November. So we have a special session of Meet the Elders. There should be 4 of us here today, but you know, old people, we don't always show up when we're expected, and sometimes we come late. We're expecting Roshi's Pat Enki O'Hara and Nancy Mujo Baker to be joining us, and we thought we would do.
Enkyo's here. It says interview room 1 for her name.
Okay.
She was hiding behind that.
Enkyo in.
Yeah, Chloe, can you spotlight Roshi Enkyo? Thank you.
Interview room 1, I think it's called. We'll bring her up. Enkyo's greetings, Enkyo.
Sorry, I was just doing interview on another, and I failed to log off and log back on. So this is my other name.
So what we thought we would do today is that we would share with you some memories of the first time we met Bernie and the last time we were with him. And then we would open it up to everybody else who's here who would like to share their first time they were with Bernie and the last time. And then if there's any time after that, we will take questions. We're going to do this girl, boy. Enkyo is going to start us off because, among other reasons, she has to leave at 1 o'clock. And then Shishin will go second, and hopefully Nancy Mujo Baker will arrive in time to go third, and I'll go fourth. And if any other boys show up, they can go afterwards. And then we'll open it up. So take it away, Enkyo.
Thank you. It's so good to see all of us here, friends of Bernie. Thank you. So I'm kind of in the mid-range of people. I mean, I know Shishin knew Bernie long before I did. But in the early 90s, I was studying with Bernie's Dharma brother, Dido Lurie, in upstate New York. And at the same time, I was teaching interactive media and video and doing different video things around New York City. So Dido asked me to go make a video of Bernie's new project, building housing for the homeless in Yonkers. So I packed up my gear and set out to meet someone called Tetzigan. He wasn't familiarly known as Bernie at that time. And I arrived in Yonkers in this really kind of rundown neighborhood, and I was directed to climb a ladder up to the roof. There I found this guy in this kind of shredded Samoa that he was falling out of. It was all wrinkled, and he had a big tool belt around his waist, and he was working with a team of carpenters repairing this roof. Bulging out of his Japanese ragged Samoa jacket, work hat on, talking with the crew. And, I was used to a more formal kind of presentation by a Zen guy. And so I was kind of a little shocked and delighted, and then immediately in love with this energetic, informal guy who turned out to be all business when it was time for the interview. He was brilliant and convincing, as he always was. And too soon that meeting was over. But it left me with this kind of seductive, magical feeling about this old school Zen master from the Middle Ages in Japan is the impression that I got. Kind of sloppy, kind of not in a perfection mode. And that was my first taste of Bernie. It wasn't too long that circumstances arose that I joined with him. I studied with him. I worked with and for him and the then Peacemakers for many years. It was a time of great insight and love and learning. Years passed. We held our connection, but our paths, he became internationally known. And I became kind of like just in Manhattan, running a little Zen group. But whenever he needed me, I was there. And, from time to time, he needed me a lot. And I would go running off to run an errand for him or do something. But time being what it is, we grew more apart, more distant. And especially after the stroke, I saw him a few times upstate. And I recalled the last time that we connected. And it was at the ZCLA reunion, the reunion of all the people who had studied in Los Angeles together in the early days and had gone all over the world. And there was Bernie, smaller, used to kind of, even though he never was very tall, he always presented large. Here he was kind of small and sitting in a wheelchair. We sat together quietly, laughed a little bit about our lives together, how we met, how we fell away, how we met again. What I saw at that time, his sadness, and also his great love of all the people in that space. There were a lot of people there for this reunion at ZCLA. And he was so loved and appreciated by everyone, and by so many expressed that at the meeting. And I was very grateful to just be sitting with him and witness him at his first temple, at his old temple, where it all began with him. And it was during that time that it fully came to me that from the very beginning, Bernie always let me just be myself, just who I am. It never required of me to come up to any other standard, any social standard, or any standard that he might have, other than my own. And that was his great teaching for me. And I'll always be grateful for that. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you.
Jerry?
Well, okay, thank you. It's good to see many of my friends here from all around the world. I met Bernie in 1972 when I came to the Zen Center of Los Angeles to practice Zen with Maizumi Roshi. So that was, do the math in my head, that was 52 years ago. And Bernie had ordained as a monk, and he was the head monk and at the Zen Center. And he was very serious. There was not even a trace of a clown's nose anywhere in all space and time. He was a serious Zen practitioner and was very focused and wasn't really very accessible. And also, I'm very happy to see his children here, Alicia and Mark, who I met in the 70s, and I have to share that my image of Mark, I think, will be indelibly impressed in my mind. Was he was a rascal, and he had broken both of his arms, and he had them both in casts. And in their house at the Zen Center, they had a rocking chair, and there was Mark standing with one foot on one arm of the rocking chair and another foot on the other arm of the rocking chair, swinging around with both of his arms in casts, as if all he had left to do was break a leg, I think. But he was a real fearless kid, and of course, he was allowed to do that. Elise, it's really wonderful to see you too. But I do want to say that that Bernie really put a lot of energy into the Zen Center. In fact, the growth of the Zen Center in the 70s and was primarily due to his energy. Maizumi Roshi was the teacher there, but Bernie was the engine. And he was always a visionary. I mean, he just kept doing more and more things. We bought more and more houses there on the block. But, and then I think it was, I also want to mention that the next year, I think it was 73, we had our very first head monk ceremony. Of course, the Japanese is Shuso Hosen, where he would make the next transition in his training. And he had a koan that he presented to the Zen Center, to the congregation, to the Sangha, and we questioned him on it. And it was the first Shuso Hosen I ever saw, and it was the first one we had at the Zen Center of Los Angeles. And Bernie, of course, did a wonderful job. And it's the first time I saw Maizumi Roshi cry in the Zendo. It was during that ceremony. He was so grateful to have a successor like Bernie. And the only other time I saw Maizumi Roshi cry in the Zendo was when his mother died, which was another kind of crying. But Maizumi Roshi was always very proud of Bernie. When Bernie left, I think it was in 78 or so, to go to New York and started the Zen community of New York. Maizumi Roshi didn't always understand what he was doing with the bakery and with the homeless in Yonkers, but he supported him. It gave him his total support. And I see Mark there with a son. I don't know if that's his only son, but hi. When Bernie was very proud when Mark had a son, and he said to me that the Glassman name will continue. So I want you to know that how proud he was to have a grandson. and I went with Maizumi Roshi when as his attendant when Bernie ascended the mountain at Grayston at the mansion there, and he became the abbot of the Zen community of New York, and he also did another dialogue. We call it Dharma combat, but we used to call it Dharma combat. We now call it Dharma dialogue to get rid of that warrior sense of it. And people asked him questions. I'll never forget. I mean, Bernie is just so quick in on his in his repartee. And one of the questions somebody asked him is, how did you become the abbot of a Zen community? And he said, I read an ad in the New York Times. I thought it was just very clever. And I traveled to New York and helped Bernie particularly after Maizumi Roshi died when I could. And I helped him, with the transmission of some of his successors, particularly Egyoku. He invited me there for that one. And also invited me to be on the board of directors of the Zen Peacemakers. And so I helped him out as much as I could. And one of the projects that I've had for 20 years, started 20 years ago, was to write a modern commentary on the 5 ranks of Tozan, which is one of the teachings that we studied with Maizumi Roshi. And I was stuck. 10 years I'd thought about it, and I asked Bernie if he wanted to collaborate with me and we could do it together, and he thought it was a wonderful idea. And I flew to Montague. Well, actually, I was working in Springfield, Massachusetts at the time, and we met in Montague and discussed the 5 ranks. And then one time he had a meeting of his students, and we went through the 5 ranks, and I see Barbara Wegmüller there. She was there, and we had a good time. He had us write poems, and it was a lot of fun. But then before we finished the book, he had a stroke, and then a few years later he died. But I want to say that I finished the book. I think it'll come up backwards on the screen, but here it is, the 5 ranks of Zen. It'll be officially published a week from today on Monday, and I dedicated it to Roshi Bernie Glassman, my brother, my mentor, my friend, and a true mensch. And Bernie and I got to be very good friends. When I first met him, I said he was very impenetrable, but over the years, I think he became, more open, and I became more open, and we were quite good friends by the time he died. The last time I saw him was actually at a meeting that we had in Montague after his stroke, and at that meeting, I see Grant here. That's when Grant received transmission from Bernie at that meeting, and a few of others I see here were also present. So we talked on the phone after that, and I remember one of our last conversations was about my grandson having a bar mitzvah, and he was very happy about that too. So I think that's enough. Thanks for listening.
Mujo, are you here yet?
Again, I've been watching for her, but I don't think she's here yet.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I think I met Bernie probably around the time that Enkyo did. I had been sitting at the Soho Zendo and had done sessions with Kyudo Roshi for a couple of years, and then he stopped coming. to New York regularly after he became abbot at Ryutakuji and got very busy there. And in this completely, fortuitous way, my my path crossed the path of Diane Shaneberg, who some of you will remember, who had been a student, a Zen student for a long time, and had been a student of Bernie's. What I didn't know was that at that moment she wasn't talking to Bernie, but she encouraged me to go to Yonkers and check out Bernie. And I expected to see Diane there. I didn't see her there probably for another 5 years uh, before she came back. Uh, but I arrived, and Bernie looked to me a lot like he looked to Enkyo, except I thought his Japanese monk's work outfit looked kind of ironed and neat. He was sitting on a bench just inside the door of the old mansion on the convent grounds in Yonkers. I didn't know who he was, but I told him I was new there, and he told me to talk to Jishu, who was coming down the stairs because she was one of the senior students at the time and was in charge of newcomers or something. But Bernie did a Dharma talk that day, and what I remember from the talk was he said that social action and Zazen were both aspects of a balanced life. And I thought I was home. That I had been, I guess, basically a social activist all my life, but didn't have much peace. And I had turned to Zen looking for some peace in my life, and then would feel guilty that I was going on a sesshin when I could be out there in the streets and doing something to protest something. And this idea that I wasn't being pulled in two different directions, that I could hold these two sides at once was kind of miraculous at that moment. And a couple of years later, or a year and a half later, something like that, I built up the courage to ask Bernie to be my teacher. And he said yes, kind of much to my surprise. Uh, and he remained my teacher, still my teacher. And that I guess I've been working on what I heard that first day for now, what is it, 30 something years. Zazen and social action are two aspects of a balanced life. And it's been quite an adventure. I was pretty lucky as things turned out. Uh, uh, I got to see him pretty regularly in the last years of his life. Again, it was kind of luck that my life kept taking me in the proximity of Montague. And the last time I saw him was a week before he died. We'd had dinner, I guess, on Saturday night. My daughter was with me, and Eve was with us, and I don't remember where we had dinner. I don't remember much of the conversation. I think my daughter and Eve carried most of the most of the conversation forward. And but Bernie, I took Bernie out for breakfast the next morning, and we went to his favorite breakfast place just outside of Amherst, Johnny's Diner. And we sat. Bernie wasn't very mobile at that point, so we sat toward the, in the last booth in the back, so that it was the shortest possible walk to the bathroom. And our relationship was different. It had become very different. I guess particularly after he gave me transmission. He was, I think, interested in hearing about what I was doing, but was never directing me. I think that was maybe the experience of most of his successors, maybe all of us. That once, Bernie was kind of interested in following us, meaning, seeing where our path would take us, rather than trying to steer us anywhere in particular. At that moment in my life, I was beginning to think about how we had built this network of charter schools on Staten Island, and I was beginning to think about how I was going to extricate myself from that, and how I could ease myself out. And I was intrigued by this idea that I'd gotten from Google of the office of the founder, and could I slide into something like that? And I remembered that when I first met Bernie in Yonkers, the room that he was doing Dyson in was the office of the founder. And Bernie was, what was Bernie's title then? Chuck Leaf was the president and Bernie was the founder. And I was looking at breakfast to get some advice from Bernie about this, and I asked him, if he remembered anything about how or why he set up the office of the founder. And he said, no. That was all the advice I got. I had to set up an office of the founder. I never did it. But it was so good to be with him. He shaped my life in ways that I never could have imagined 30 years ago when Diane Shaneberg sent me to Yonkers. That's the first and last. Jeff, maybe you could open it up to folks in the audience. We just remember, Jeff, Enkyo has to leave by 1 o'clock. So a little bit before 1, we want to give her a chance to share any additional thoughts.
We better do it now, because I just got a text and I do have to leave. And it was so good to hear from Shishan and you, Ken. Such intimate stories. I mean, it's impossible. I was just giving a timeline, but it's impossible to kind of express the quality of riding around in a car with Bernie, talking about business and the Dharma, and business and the Dharma, and back and forth, and making a joke, and being present. His presence was profoundly a teaching presence, regardless of what the subject matter was. He took everything to the absolute point, and I think all of us who are still here now are giving testament to that. This was a very, very wild individual who taught us so much in so many ways where there's no words for it. It's the spirit of it. And when I see Barbara there nodding, you know, I think of his influence on people around the world. I mean, when I went to Auschwitz with him, I mean, who would have ever thought of that at that time? It was just moment after moment, a brilliant idea, a way for us to become one. And it was so powerful. And I am so grateful to him to this day. And I'll never forget him. So thank you for letting me participate. And I'm so sorry I had another engagement I just can't miss. Take care.
Thank you, Henkyo. Great success for the rest of your day. Fun. Friends, we've got more of you than I can see. So if you'd, I'd love to get a lot of people sharing here, but please use your electronic hand if you would be so kind. It's down under React. It's either React or Reactions, depending on your version, and it'll put up your little electronic hand, and I'll be able to see you. Some of you have cameras off, so I wouldn't see your hand anyway. So we have a lot of people who have been part of the larger community for decades. So I'm hoping for some rich conversation here. So please, let's open it up. Jeff, don't make me call on you.
No, I was looking, I didn't know if I should push my react button or just start talking. Oh gosh, shall I start talking then, I guess?
Go for it.
Oh man, it's wonderful to be here with all you guys and celebrate the burn. Oh man, yeah, he was a wild guy. I remember my first meeting with him. It was at a dinner celebrating Ram Dass's birthday. And I got to sit next to Bernie. And Bernie leans over to me and he says, "Hey, I really dug The Big Lebowski." I go, "Oh, thanks." He says, "You know, it's chock full of koans." And I'm all about bringing Buddhism into the modern times. I said, "What do you mean filled with koans?" He says, "Well, look who wrote and directed it, you know, the Koan brothers." I laughed and I said, yeah. And he says, "Yeah, it's filled with koans." I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He said, "Well, the dude abides, you know, that's very Buddhistic." And I said, "You know, and what else?" He's, "Well, my favorite one is, that's just your opinion, man." And then he goes on, he says, "Shut the fuck up, Donnie. That's a good one." You know, he says, let's write a book about all this." And, you know, that is, talk about wild, weird ideas, some stranger talking to you about writing a book. But there was something in me. So I said, yeah, why not? That sounds like a good idea. I kind of dig this guy. So we went up to Montana for a week to my place up there. And we sat with my buddy Alan Kozlowski, who videoed the whole thing and transcribed it all. And we just hung out for a week talking to each other every day and all kind of captured. And that turned into a book, This Dude and the Zen Master, that Eve edited. So I got to spend a lot of time with Eve and tweaking the book and so forth. And that started our relationship. and I can't remember the date on it, but you know, being an old guy, all of you, I don't know what about memory? Our memories, man. My memory, I can't figure out if it's old age or COVID or what, but it's hard for me to remember stuff. Something that just popped into my mind. You know who else died today? Quincy Jones,
Mhm.
who was a wonderful guy and had a lot of the same spirit as Bernie, this generosity and this encouraging creativity and truth and beauty and bringing out who are you, what you got, what's your gift, man. And that was so wonderful and so encouraging. Uh, yeah, I got some. Just as we were talking, I jotted some words down. And yeah, he was so. He was also quite vulnerable, as I hear for you guys talk who knew him before I did. He was kind of, protective and stern and so forth. But I experienced a very vulnerable side of him. And his name, Tetsugen, help me with this, you guys, but doesn't that mean uh, uh, unable to see because it's too close to you? Isn't that kind of what the translation is? I think. I don't know. And I think he kind of acknowledged that he wasn't, as as wise and uh, you know, uh, he had places to learn too. He was still open, and I think Eve was a wonderful catalyst for that. Their relationship was always fascinating to me. Uh, there was an interview. You guys have probably seen it on the internet. He's in a red beret, and I can't remember who's interviewing, but it's a wonderful. It always gives me a great hit of burn. He's sitting there smoking his cigar. He said, the guys, he says, well, my big problem now is my cigar's out. And Eve used to give him a lot of shit for smoking his cigar, and he acknowledged that and worked with that. We'd love to smoke cigars together. He had those big eyebrows, that really kind of gave him some gravitas, Zen gravitas. He looks like one of those ancient guys. And I look at his son, Mark, there. You look so much like him, Mark. I can't believe it. It's wild. Uh, oh, uh, we talked a lot, I remember in the early days about Alan Watts. He was, I think, a big fan of Alan and kind of brought him to the Zen party. Uh, I remember talking to him towards the end of his life when he was, his face was quite disfigured, but he had this bliss about him even in those times. And I remember seeing that, and that was shortly before I went through a lot of health issues, and that really gave me, courage and inspiration on how he dealt with those tough times. Uh, I remember I'd invite him to do these weird little things with me, like I was doing this movie Tron, about modern. I was reading it was the second, the sequel to it, and I said, "Gee, it doesn't have the right kind of spiritual philosophy that I was been working with Bernie. You want to come in and hang with us a bit and see what you got?" So we had a big long table. The producers, the financiers are here, and I brought my original Tron hat with me. I just have it up here, and I said, "Bern, put this hat on." It's funny, it doesn't fit me anymore, but I said, "Put this hat on and jam with us a little bit." So he put that hat on, and just as he puts it on, in comes the head of Disney and sees this guy with these eyebrows and this hat. And oh man, we all started laughing. And then he just started to spew and just let his, like he never, he didn't really prepare. Whenever he talked, he just showed up and gave what was there. And that was so beautiful. And that's what he did that day. His clown work, his red nose, that either you put it on the other guy or you put it on yourself. That's a wonderful teaching right there. I'm looking forward to reading your 5 ranks of Zen, Jerry. And Bernie, I love him so much. Unlike you guys, he never formally gave me transmission or anything like that, but just a dear, dear friend who taught me so much. And I'm so glad I'm connected with him and you guys. You carry on the burn. So
Thanks, Jeff. Good to hear from you.
yeah, not great to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I am.
Friends, we've got some time here, so, and most everybody knows one another, so relax and let's hear from you.
Hey, Ken and everyone. So I'm just meeting to just duck in and to say hello to everybody. And I just posted on Facebook in my feed a lot of photos that I had of Bernie. I have to go to the doctors. I had a bad fall and shattered my elbow. And so, old age prevails, needless to say. I'm lucky to have lived this long. But anyway, I'm transitioning out of this meeting into the car and to get to the doctors again. But anyway, you might enjoy the photographs. They're in my, feed. I put up about 70 photos of Bernie. And I have lots. I took lots and friends have taken, and I kind of accumulated a big collection, and I miss that guy.
Thanks for stopping in, Joan, and we wish the best for your elbow.
Yeah, me too. It's actually, it's interesting. It's been sort of beneficial, pointing out, old age, sickness, and death. Mortality is right there for all of us, and just thinking about Bernie and how he taught us so much about not knowing and bear witness. And I think a lot of us are sharing the same age experience and dancing with it, with not knowing. So love you all. Great to see you. So many old friends online. Wonderful.
Heal well, Joan. Bye-bye. Well, let's continue. And
Jeff,
as
I
to not
got
keep
a-
this. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
Wright's got a text from Nancy Baker that she needs the link. If you or Chloe could send it to her.
Chloe, would you mind? You got it? Thank you so much. I mean, while we're waiting for Nancy, let's not keep this too US centric. We have a number of European friends here. If anybody would like to step up. I'm looking at you, Barbara.
So, hello, dear friends. It's so wonderful to see you all and feel the family so strongly. So I met Bernie in 1999 at the first Auschwitz retreat. And at that time, I already had done 10 years of Sufi meditation. And when I met him and he spoke about social action, I felt this was really something that I wanted to learn from him. And I appreciated so much his way just to be present. I remember that I was really scared at that place at the first moment. And when he sat next to me, I just could feel how I could relax because I felt his warm and supportive presence. And that stayed for all the 19 years that I had the big luck to be with him. So in the first 5 years, he used to tell Roland, my husband, and to myself that he will not take students anymore because he would be too old and the responsibility to guide us would be too big for him. So after 5 years, I asked him, hey, Bernie, I think I would like to do Chukai. What do you think, to whom I should go? And then he said, it's so clear, I am your teacher. So I think it is really one of the biggest gifts of my life. And I feel endlessly grateful for his generosity, for the time he spent with us. We had the chance to travel a lot with him, and he often came to Europe. He often was with us in our home here. He loved to just sit in the garden, smoke his cigarette. And when I was cooking for the family, he was at his computer in the same room. And very often we did not speak for a long time, but he was just present and I did my stuff and he did work on the computer. And then in the evenings when we sat in the garden, sometimes we had really very deep conversations and I got a lot of teachings. And especially also the support that my life as a mother of 5 children was my practice. So to support me in that, he also sent me to Lama Tsultrimalione, which was wonderful because she also is a mother and we could share as mothers. But Bernie really appreciated that I said, well, Bernie, I don't want to leave my family for weeks to sit in sessions because I feel that they need me. And Bernie gave me the okay that was really good. And that was my practice, just to appreciate my life as a woman, as a mother. And I think this gift is huge. And I really hope that I can especially also support other mothers and other women in giving them the chance to sit, to practice, to study, but really to appreciate what they are doing. So Bernie was really such a gift, as I heard from you, just to tell me that I can be me and that I don't have to go to the monastery to practice, to do the real thing, because I had this feeling for a long time also that one part of my soul told me I should go to the monastery to do the real practice. And so this was really the most liberating thing that Bernie offered to me, that he said, it's completely okay just to cook for your children, to be with them, and to sit when you can, but really to appreciate who you are and what you are doing. So I love him very much. And I saw him in person the last time in the the Los Angeles Center when we had the 50th birthday of CCLA. And then I saw him often in Zoom conversations. And the teachings he gave us when he had the stroke were so moving. He was so much really a mensch. he never pretended just to be the big guy who didn't suffer, who didn't had also feelings of even fear. And this was so wonderful just to meet him as a mensch and listening to him as a human being. So the gift that we got in this time, in these last meetings on Zoom, was maybe the biggest gift he gave me and the biggest advice how to get old and be old and go on with whatever happens. So of course, the meetings with you, Jishin and Ken, and with the whole family, where we studied, where I could learn from all of you, it was unbelievable, wonderful. And so he also brought us together as a family, which I feel deeply in my heart, that all of you became my teachers and also deep, loving persons in my life. So I thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. Very nice to see you. Nancy Mucho, are you here somewhere? I don't see your name, but maybe you have a different label or you're off camera. I don't know if you've managed to come in. Maybe not, maybe not.
I just sent her the link again. I just emailed me no link, so I just sent it
Oh,
again.
Thanks, Ken. We'll watch for her. Maybe we can stay focused here for a minute on some of you who are visiting, who are not from the U.S. Ovidio or Frank or Francisco or someone else, if anyone would like to share. Frank, you've got your hand up. Thank you for using
Yes.
your yellow hand.
Yeah. Yes. Hi, it's really very nice to be part of this meeting. It's actually moving to see old friends and see new people and to hear stories. It's yeah, Bernie had on my life a really big impression, an imprint actually. You know, I met Zen through a book when I was in the hospital, like 40 years ago. I was in the hospital, and in the library of the hospital, there was a book on Peter Matteson's book, The Nine-Headed Dragon River. And I read the book, and that's how I came to Zen, actually, through the story in the book, to the story about Bernie's trip to Japan with Maizumi Roshi. And so I started actually being inspired by the book. I started practicing here in Belgium in a small group of the Sangha of Master Deshimaru. And due to the winds of reality, I got to meet Catherine Guénaud-Pagès Roshi in France. And I started practicing with her, and she became my teacher. And then in '96, she received an invitation to come to the first Auschwitz retreat. So she asked me to join her together with Michelle Roshi and Amy Roshi now. And the four of us drove up to Poland from Paris in one day. So we arrived late at night on the Sunday night in Krakow, and we were driving. I had never met Bernie. So we were driving in the dark through the streets, and suddenly Michelle said, "Oh, there's Bernie." So, and we looked, and ahead of us, walking on the sidewalk, there were two men walking. We saw them from the back, and I recognized Andrei Krajewski. And next to Andrei, there was my father. Or that was like my impression. The same statue, the same length, the same movement. Really, it was like, and I knew my father was back home. But so my very first impression, I mistook Bernie for my father, which is also kind of meaningful metaphorically in a certain way, because he became really a kind of spiritual father for me. So that first retreat was really mind-blowing, being there on that place together. bearing witnessing, practicing. And so at the end of the retreat, the last night on the Shabbat, after the meal, Bernie was sitting there with some people around, and I took all my courage together to go to say hello to him. So I introduced myself. I'm from Paris, and actually I said to Bernie, I came to practice through this book, telling your story, and now I'm here. And he looked at me with really very tender eyes. He said, "Oh, that's so good," but he said, "I am so tired. I'm sorry, I'm so tired." And I was so moved by this radical honesty on that very moment. He was like just expressing what was, true for him. I mean, at the end of this first retreat, and he really kind of, he touched something. He was not, I mean, I've read about him, this strong Zen teacher, this, the future of American Zen, as it was called. And he was like so tender and so honest about the moment he lived there. So next time I met him was on the street retreat in Cologne, where we really bonded and got together. We back together. We had a really amazing time on that first street retreat in '97. So I had the opportunity to spend some time with him in Santa Barbara, to live in his house. I was sometime in Montague a few times. We traveled. We did, I was 13 times with him on the Auschwitz retreat. And the last time I saw him in real life was in 1916, when we were on the Auschwitz retreat. On the Wednesday, with some of the old-timers, we went to visit the hospice that was founded in Auschwitz. The hospice, which was actually inspired by an idea Bernie brought up, and in memory of the people there. And so after our visit, and Barbara was there too, I remember, after their visit, they went back to the retreat, and I went together with Bernie back to the center of dialogue, because he had to catch a plane. So I stayed with him for a long time, actually, waiting for the taxi in the hall of the Center for Dialogue. And it was really very intimate and together. And he apologized, strangely enough. I mean, because earlier that year we had a big meeting in Montague with the ZPO, and during one of those days we had a kind of intense discussion about monies and organizing and stuff, and he got really angry at that meeting, I do remember. But that day, which turned out the last time I saw him, in the hall of the Center for Dialogue, he apologized about his way of reacting then. And it was really very, very sweet. And since then, I hadn't seen him anymore in real life. I saw him a few times on Zoom, but it's that same radical honesty he had. And which was the last time I saw him, that he was, he was saying, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it in this way. And, was really moving. So I carry him in my heart. Last week, as a tribute in the Sangha, I presented the poem that he wrote for his Shishanshiki, which is a nice Zen-like poem from 1982. And it's a wonderful to be together. It's a tribute to his work and to his being. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much. Elaine, I see your hand, but I also know that Roshi Nancy has come in. So if you don't mind, let me see if we can have Nancy Baker step up. And Nancy, if you can hear me, maybe you can turn on your camera and you can share a little bit. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Wherever you are.
There I am. Can you hear me and see me?
I can hear you. Oh, there you are. Hi, hi.
I'm terribly sorry. I have had a strange thing happen with Zoom telling me I couldn't open it unless I updated my app, and I do not and never have had an app. So anyway, here I am. So what can I tell you? My first meeting and last meeting with Bernie. Yes.
Yeah, that
Right.
would be
Well,
wonderful.
I'll tell you, my first meeting is, but it's not about the beginning of our relationship so much, but it was very funny. It was before Grayston was bought and opened. And so Bernie gave an introduction to Zen weekend, and everybody said, this is very unusual and don't miss it, and so on. So I came, and then at some point we were allowed to go in and have an interview with him one-on-one, and we're taught how to make a full bow and so on. So it was my turn, and I went in and I made the bow, and I'm all the way, the door that I came in, through which I came, was miles from where he was sitting, and there I am on my knees, and he goes like this, and I didn't know where I was supposed to be or anything. So on my knees, I come a little closer, and then he keeps going like this, and so I went across the whole room on my knees. And then something happened that I kept as a great secret until one day I didn't, and he got a laugh. He was not the most verbally articulate person in the world, and he wanted to know all about me, and I told him I was a, professor of philosophy, etc., and that I was looking forward to writing a book on Wittgenstein and mysticism. And he said, oh, Wittgenstein, he's a fan of mine. And, he meant to say I'm a fan of his. And so this was a big secret that I kept, and because I thought this was a terrible mistake for a Zen teacher to make, and then finally it became a joke between us. But my relationship with him was unusual because it was very deep and not very obvious to other people. And every time I came in to see him, I would cry. And I was in the very early years, which were quite difficult for everybody. And I was, I didn't live with the community, and I had a so-called career. I think this is the first time I had ever used that word or heard it used of me. But and I think that was helpful in my relationship with him because it didn't have all the object relations around it that so many other people's relationships did in those early days. And it was very, very deep and mysterious in some ways. And then at the very end of his life, I remember after he had his stroke that I spent a month every summer way up in the mountains of New Hampshire. And so I would drive by Montague or on the highway. And so I went in to see, or I drove up to see him after the stroke, and he was in the kitchen and with a bunch of people, and I came in, and he seemed very happy to see me, and he went like this, and he actually got his other hand up, and everybody was thrilled, to see him able to do that. But shortly before he died, I saw him twice on the summer trips back and forth, and it was very near the time he died, and I said about the stroke, he had earlier said to me, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. and he knew I knew what he meant, namely that it had got him to be still in a way. And to, that he was always driven to develop this, that, and the other, for which the world is grateful. But then in these last couple of visits, especially the last one, I said to him, Bernie, as he well knew, I said, I never followed the social action side of you. And I, when he first came to New York from Los Angeles, it was a standard kind of Zen center, like a day out of monastery life. And it was all very formal and so on. And he was the side of him that appeared before he started leaving this kind of Zen practice was the wisdom side. And of the two, wisdom and compassion. And I said to him, sitting there with him near the end, and I don't think either of us knew it was the end, but it was clear that something enormous had happened, with the stillness that he was having to face, to be. And I said, I never did follow the social action side of you, but I really have inherited the wisdom side. And he started to cry. And I cried. And I was so happy that I had been able to say that to him. So, Bernie, we miss you.
And thank you, Nancy, very much. And we wish you the best with your health. We know you've been.
Yes, thank you. I need it. All the wishes I could get.
Well, we say your name every day, so
Thank you.
hopefully it's helping. Irene, thank you for being patient. Please go ahead and.
My pleasure. Hello, everybody. I have so many sweet memories of Bernie, and I'm so grateful for all that, all the moments I met him. Just before this meeting, we had a meeting of the Zen Peacemakers of the Lowlands, which is Belgium and the Netherlands. And together with Frank de Waal, we are the spirit holders. So we are trying to, set forth Bernie's life work. And I met Bernie at the second Auschwitz retreat. So that must have been 97 then. And Alisa and Mark were there, and Joan Halifax and Gas Tanahashi. And I stayed overnight with Andrei and Magosha Krajewski. And Bernie and Jishu came over to their house. So we spent the evening there, which was very lovely. And another sweet memory is when Jishu and Bernie moved to Santa Fe, just 5 minutes from Upaya Zen Center, Joan Halifax's center. And she died shortly after they moved there. I was in Upaya and I walked over the park to Bernie, and he said, "Come sit down next to me on the couch and have a cup of tea." And he took a photo book with pictures of Jishu and his life together. And I think we sat there for, I don't know, half an hour, and he was just sharing about Jishu, and it was so moving and precious to, to be able to bear witness to, their life together. I'll never forget that. I also remember at the first Auschwitz retreat, I was asked, why are you here? And I said, I really don't know. And little did I know that that was a very good Zen Peacemaker answer, because I didn't know yet about the 3 tenets. I don't know. I really didn't know, but I did meet Joan Halifax there and received transmission from her in 2012. So Bernie, I always called him my grandpa. So I met him many times in Upaya, but also in the Netherlands whenever he came here, or when he came to Salt Lake City when I was a resident at Kansion Zen Center and clown workshops. And he really is very very present in my heart, and also in you know, since I'm a teacher now, it's part of my teaching also. So really grateful for that. And thank you all for your beautiful stories.
Thank you, Keigetsu. Friends, we've got another 15 minutes or so if someone else would like to share. Ovidio, I knew you would step up. There you are. We need to hear from Brazil. You're muted still, my friend.
Okay, now it's okay, the sound?
Now
All
you're good.
right, good. So I'm glad to be with you again. Last week and today, I think maybe I know a third of the people here, which is quite a lot. I'm quite happy about that. So I live in South Brazil, in a big town. And 20 years ago, I practiced at our local Zen center. And when I found out about the Zen Peacemakers online, I was really thrilled because I've been a social activist, a Zen practitioner, and also being a psychiatrist, very much involved with, psychological development. And I found that in the Zen Peacemakers, all those aspects, they came together, the spirituality, the activism, and the psychological development. Counsel, for me, is a powerful tool for psychological development. And Bernie has always been very attuned to this. You remember when he had that training for the Zen houses? He had a big psychology training for the people who were taking the training at the Zen Center in Montague. But, it's interesting, I think when I arranged for Bernie to come to Brazil 20 years ago, was the World Social Forum, a big deal here. It was the gathering of all the leftists in the world, and this was in my city in 2005. So about 45 days before Bernie comes, I get an email, I'm sorry, but I can't come. But, my wife, Eve Marco, she's quite eager to come. So would you like to have her, replacing me? I said, sure, So Eve came and was very nice. We developed a long relationship. And, Roshi Cohen, that many of you know her, she also knew Bernie from the Zen CLA. And she said, oh, Bernie, she was a little upset because, 45 days before, she had already carnival tickets. That was, during carnival time, and she had the carnival tickets for them to enjoy themselves, but that was not possible. I had 5 years of training in Brooklyn as my psychiatric residency. And it happened that I'm Jewish. I lived in Israel. I smoked cigars. I like jokes. So Bert and I hit it off, just because a lot of commonalities. And I really felt, he was like, for me, some sort of like a big brother. And, that I always admired, but I always felt close. I never felt any big distance, Also, I was with him, for a week, 10 days. He came again. He indeed, he ended up coming to visit Brazil, 2012, spent 10 days here in Porto Alegre, São Paulo. That was very nice. So, but one of the things that to me is very, very important about Bernie is this: Bernie had this great ability to deal with success and failure with great equanimity, with great equilibrium. This word equanimity I learned in English, and I think it's an important word. Some people say, you practice Zen to to acquire this equanimity that I think Bernie was a very nice personification for it. And I also had the chance, the last years of his life, I have many friends in the States. So every year I went to the States and I made a point of visiting him in Montague and spending, a day there and having breakfast or lunch with them. So I also miss him a lot. And I think that we are able to every year to get together and to talk about his legacy and to maintain this friendship among us. This is a great tribute to the person that he was. Thank you.
Thanks, Ovidio. Dr. Roland Roshi, if you'd like to open your mic and share. Thanks
Okay,
for putting up your hand.
please, yeah. I'm so happy to see people I've not seen for years, maybe 10 years, and all these friends and teachers who I can see now. Thank you that you show up and listen to me. So when I met Bernie, you heard already from Barbara, he didn't want to be a teacher anymore. He just wanted to be a peer. And he started the circle in Paris. Frank is here. And we had meetings maybe 4 or 5 times a year in a circle form. And Bernie was very fond of the circle idea. He said, enlightenment is a group experiment. And he thought or gave us the feeling that that we are really close to it. We were very motivated to do studies, sitting together, and this exchange was so joyful, and we learned such a lot. And every time when we met, there was one of the group was the facilitator, and Bernie had to be or try to be a peer. And often he said, I want to talk now. Now let me talk. I want to share. And I often remind myself how impatient he was and how eager he was to share and to sit in the circle and to be with us. And it happened to me that he looked at me and said, don't look at me as if I would be your teacher. But of course, he was my teacher. And Barbara already shared that 5 years later, he accepted us giving Chukai. So I'm so happy that he accepted this role to be a teacher. But in a way, he remained always Bernie. That doesn't mean that he, for me, was not the great teacher. He was really the great teacher and had a lot of wisdom, but also I could feel that there is the love that I was looking for as a Sufi. He invited me and Barbara as Sufis. And he even said, when he was asking, who is Buddhist here? And when we raised our hands, he said, you remain Sufis. And I can say that I didn't experience the hard Bernie, the Zen Bernie. I just experienced much more the Sufi Bernie, the one who after 50 years, and I did also a film with him, my 50 years of Zen. And he shared 10 years and then 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and 50 years. And I remember that he said once when he was asked, how were the 21st years for you? The 20 years, and Bernie answered and said, well, I would change the roughness of it. And as I was sharing a week ago, the meeting, I heard that you were much more telling this hard Bernie, but for me, Bernie was soft. He was really a soft person. He was a real teacher. He was wise, very wise, and there was always this coming together and through a reunion. And he himself even said, "Oh, you know, I am a lonely man. I'm a lonely. I like to stay alone." But when we met or when we arrived at the hotel, 5 minutes later rang the phone and it was Bernie and said, Hello, how are you? Where do we meet and when do we meet?" So I must say I miss him a lot. I miss him a lot, especially when and in the end, the last time when I was pulling him around in Auschwitz, he said, "Roland, now you can talk with me about love." And that opened my heart and it touches me still. That yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. And my friend Jennifer, I think maybe you might be the last one, and then I'll hand back to Ken. I don't know if you're still in South America, but if you're home, welcome home.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Good. No, I just got off an all-night flight from New York to Santiago, and then I'm going to Bahia, Brazil, at the end of this week, Roland. So I'm on quite a journey. This is all for work. But I realized I was not going to sleep and I could actually do this, which was really important to me. So I want to just say a couple of things. And I feel like it's come out through the last session and through this that Roshi is a very human man, human person, right? Which means we're all these complex parts of us. And in that, he had incredible activism and passion for justice. And that's why I went to him to study with him. I mostly actually knew, so I felt last week of Elisa and Mark, your speaking was just very sobering and hard and very real and quite beautiful in its own way about his own struggles to figure out how to be a father. And so I just wanted to say that. I also want to say, before I tell you my one story, that I knew Roshi a lot, but I knew him because of the women that he loved. So I didn't get to meet your mother, his first wife, but Jishu was my teacher. And then I've been enormously close to and committed to Eve. So it's a whole, and I feel like really hats off to Roshi that he knew where to get the love and nurturing. I think that the women he loved and who loved him really provided that ability to come out, which was not always easy for him as a nurturer. So I met Jishu and Roshi Bernie on Labor Day 1994 because and my late husband Haywood Burns he drove me there, and then he always seemed to arrive with me whenever I started to study. So that was his way of, oh, I'll just be with you and go through it. But we found their house. We've been told where he lived and that I needed to meet him. Longtime activist I've been. So we drove up to his house, and it was Labor Day, and he just welcomed us in. The one funny comment was then he said, "Oh, Jishu, would you come down and make us tea?" So at which point I got up and made tea with Jishu. But we talked about studying in our lives, and it was very important that first meeting because then I began to study with him, and it was the bigger forces that led me 2 years to go through my husband's being killed in South Africa, working on the new constitution with Mandela, and while celebrating the end of apartheid. And he I have this just great memory of being in the Abyssinian Baptist Church with 3,000 people. My husband was a well-known African-American lawyer, civil rights person, writer of Constitution. 3,000 people there, and I had asked Roshi to speak. And so there was Calvin Butts. And if any of you have heard legends of Calvin Butts, there's Calvin Butts and Roshi. Calvin Butts was not thrilled that I was going to have a Zen person speak. And it became, and Roshi did just a brilliant description of who Haywood was and what he gave to the world. And so it was really that he was a Baptist Buddhist, right? Well, then Calvin Butts got up and, you would have thought he was really a Buddhist Baptist. It was just like these two people, brilliant people who both knew him in different ways. And it was very, I was just so thrilled that Roshi agreed to do that with me and went through the whole process of me receiving his body back, Haywood's body, and helping to wash it and just be with me. So there's a high moment. And I've always carried that with me about his incredible tenderness and walking me through a very hard time. The other thing I want to just say is that he really loved that I was a midwife and that I do global equity work, health equity work. He just couldn't get enough about the midwifery part. And there was something that was so joyful and full of life that he celebrated with me, that I got to mark births with women and families across the African continent, across many places in this world, and certainly in the South Bronx, where I built a birthing center. And I felt that was just really a recognition. He really could see me. And I think people have said that theme a lot, that he had that wonderful gift to see us, who we were, without our having to explain, and just know it. And I'm deeply grateful to him. Last time I saw him was, turns out that Eve's and my birthdays are right near each other. And I had a big birthday a bunch of years ago, another big one coming up. And I said, one of the things I wanted to do was to be with Roshi. So I went up there, and it was Eve's birthday, and he took us out to a really fancy dinner, and it was just a fun time. It was just a beautiful, loving, telling stories time. So he's always with me. He's there every day, always will be. I'm a deeper fighter for freedom and justice and woman and all the pieces that I am, mother, grandmother, midwife, because of having had him in my life. So thank you, Roshi.
Thank you, Jennifer. And if everyone can stay with us here, Alyssa, you had your hand up earlier. We'd love to hear from you if you'd like to open your mic.
Sure, I'll be brief. I guess I won't share the first time I met him, although it did make me try to think back to my earliest memories of him, or as a kid with him, which was probably the garden. Mark, do you remember that in back of our house, the garden that Dad had, that huge garden, which kind of seems I don't know, so different from how I think of him. And he would have us pick the tomato bugs, the worms, right? And take them off the plants. And there was a year where we lived off of that garden a lot and ate as kids. But that was before we moved to ZCLA. We lived in this home with our family. But most of my early memories with my dad was at ZCLA, and we talked about that, my brother and I, a bit last week. What I wanted to share are some of my last memories with him. Which was after his stroke. I would go and visit probably every other month or every third month to spend a long weekend there and just to be with him so that Eve could have a break and so that I could just be with him. It was really some incredible time to be with him during that time. And I know for those of you who were with my dad after the stroke, he really changed a lot. And I think maybe a couple of you said that it was an incredible experience for him. And I agree. I feel like it was my dad's final koan and Zen teaching that stroke. And he, while it was really hard for him, and I think at times he was depressed, he also got a lot of joy out of watching his body rewire itself. It was just really incredible for him to experience that. And yeah, just huge joy in seeing that happen. And he would do zazen lying down for hours and hours and hours, because that's what it takes, right, for your brain to rewire every day. And then we'd wake up and be engaged until he had to rest again. But it was just watching him through that experience. He really just was in that experience, and watching him learn to walk again on a foot where he had no feeling. And I shared last week, for me, after he died, I realized, when I was a kid, I used to joke, I can levitate, but you and your brother need to leave the room. I can only do it when no one's there. And you're like, yeah, Dad. Okay, Dad. I used to say things like that. And that I realized he did learn to levitate after his stroke, because he learned to walk with no feeling in his foot, and to watch him do that. So also he was just a different person, more present, and after that stroke. So I just think that stroke, while I wish it never happened, because I wish he was still here, was also a gift to him. And I'm thankful for that time I had with him after the stroke, to watch him be the Zen master that he is.
Thank you, Alyssa. Mark, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we can hold the space for a few more minutes if you'd like to share, or not, as you wish.
Okay, but I'll go very briefly. I just the he was what I remember the most about my dad is that he cared when when I was when I shared. He wanted to help me to be a better thinker, but he was totally um he was very connected to learning ideas that helped him to be a better person, to do better projects, to sort of grow and so he would love all of his projects, but when I shared or when I talked to him, he was he was often a caring, loving person. He often would read fun stories, but his focus was that he was either a Zen teacher and about being as connected as he could be, or about helping me um, to understand that anything I was too certain about was not really something that I should be so certain about. Um, and then also he was the social activist. He believed in the projects, and he loved that energy. He loved the energy of people who were moving forward and who were also thinking and also trying to do real good in the world. And I loved his energy, and also challenged by it. And I have a favorite story about someone complaining that he was counting his chickens before they hatched, and he told them that for every chicken that didn't hatch, he counted two more eggs, and that was just his moving forward all the time. And I love him for the good and for the challenge. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark, and good to hear from both of you. It's a wonderful way to finish. Ken, as the MC, would you like to close? You're muted, Ken.
I want to thank everybody for helping to keep Bernie alive. I miss him. And in some ways, he's just as alive as ever. Shishan, you're the senior. You want to wrap it up?
When thank you, Ken. Thank you, Elisa and Mark and everybody else who spoke. It's great to see you and hear from you. I've many fond memories of you as little ones and all your wonderful, caring human beings that came out of that environment. And Bernie moved very fast at the Zen Center, did a lot of things. And when he left, I became the administrator of the Zen Center, and reminded me when I was at a job in the summer of 1960. I worked in Disneyland as a janitor, and they had a parade every day of camels and elephants and horses going down the main street. And one of the janitors pushed a bucket behind, we called the honey bucket, which had to clean up all the droppings of the animals. And when Bernie left the Zen Center, I was in charge of the honey bucket. And I think a lot of us have taken over the honey bucket at different times, to carry on his legacy. But then as he continued to grow and evolve and transform into a more loving person, I think that the contents of the honey bucket changed. And now it's very sweet, and it's very sweet memories that we all have and that we carry forward. And it's always hard when the founder of an organization passes, but I'm really inspired by the commitment and the determination and the love of everybody here to carry forward Zen Peacemaker. Especially want to thank Jeff and Chloe and Jim, who are maintaining the home fires for all of us. And thank everybody for your sharing and for your participation.